Now let's go back to Revelation chapter 17, because we now have the identity of the first beast, and we have the identity of the second beast. If you watch my Simon Magus video, I think you'll understand that. So now that we've got those two in place, let's go on to chapter 17 and see what else this angel talks about in reference to the beast. Hey guys, I wanted to take just a moment to tell you that throughout this video, I'm going to break in like this for a couple different reasons. This is a unique video compared to many of my other ones in that there's some things that I found out while studying this that led me and my research in a direction where I actually had very little proof or evidence to back up my proposed conclusions. So just look out. I'm going to pop in occasionally and add a little more context as this video goes along. So let's jump up here to Revelation 17, and we will go straight through this passage down to what we saw before about the beast. But there's another character here that is important to us, and it is the great whore that's riding the beast. So let's do this and learn about this character and what it means and how it relates to the beast. Starting in verse 1, it says, "There came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials and talked with me, saying to me, John, come hither, I will show to you the judgment of the great whore that sits upon many waters." And again, be aware that the angel is explaining this. This is not supposed to be veiled in mystery. She's explaining it. "This great whore that sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. The inhabitants of the earth had been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit to the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names and blasphemy." Of course, that sounds just like the beast we've been talking about. "Having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration." Now in verse 7, it goes into more of the beast information that we just read. So for now, we're going to go past that because we went through that. We're going to jump down all the way down to Revelation 17, verse 15. Because we talked about the lamb, the beast making war with the lamb overcoming. And then in verse 15 it says, "He said to me, the waters which you saw, which the whore sat on, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Many peoples, many multitudes, many nations." Verse 16, "And the 10 horns which you saw upon the beast, they will hate the whore, and will make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put in their hearts to fulfill this his will, and to agree and give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God would be fulfilled. And the woman which you saw is that great city which reigned over the kings of the earth." All right, now there's a lot of pieces we got to put together for this to make 100% sense. So bear with me. As you remember, I talked about the 10 horns before. I said it sounded like 10 principality type rulers, spiritual entities, demons, if you will, that worked with the beast hand in hand. It said here, it reiterated in 16, it said, "The 10 horns which you saw on the beast, they will hate this whore, the whore of Babylon, and make her desolate and naked, and eat her flesh and burn her with fire." God had put it in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree. Remember, it said they were unified in purpose and give their kingdom to the beast until God's words would be fulfilled. And so this is the desolation of what is mentioned above as Babylon the Great. All right. Now, the discussion of the whore of Babylon actually continues in chapter 18. So let's go ahead and read some of chapter 18 as well, because a lot of people have a lot of feelings about the whore of Babylon in this passage. A lot of people will say to me that Babylon in this passage is actually Jerusalem. And I think there's some clues that tell us otherwise. And you're probably already, if you think that way, you're probably already thinking, oh, this is ridiculous. It's definitely Jerusalem. A lot of people say that, but I have come to a different conclusion. I'm going to show you why. Babylon the Great, by the way, in this verse 5, where it says, upon her forehead a name was written, mystery, Babylon the Great. This is, many people call this Mystery Babylon. They say Mystery Babylon, like it's a proper noun. And that this is some mystery that is left to be unraveled. But the reality is, here in the Greek, this word mystery is the same as you would say for the word secret. It can be the same word. It could be translated secret Babylon, or hidden Babylon, or mystery Babylon. And so when I came to this passage and saw the Greek behind this verse, I started thinking to myself, what if Babylon here is Babylon? What if it's just Babylon? And so as I read through and tried to prove that out, every time I try to prove it out by going to the Old Testament and looking up cross-referencing, I found it to match. Whereas some of the things sound like they could apply to Israel or Jerusalem, there are some things that just don't match up. For instance, down here where it says the woman was on waters. The waters which you saw where the whore sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. This was not the state of the Jewish nation at the time this was written. The Jews were not sitting on all types of nations and multitudes of people and languages and different places all over the world. No, the Jews were not like that. They had been exiled to Babylon for a long time, but had now re-entered their homeland. The two main places the Jews was Babylon and their homeland. In fact, probably most of them were in Jerusalem and not Babylon. So this statement of the whore sitting on waters, it sounds like a multitude, which is what it says, a multitude, nations, many languages. That does not match up with Jerusalem or Israelites or Jews in the first century. And so as I started thinking about this, is this Babylon? Is this truly Babel from the Old Testament? Could that be the case? Because if you have listened to many of my other studies about the principalities of the nations and how those are manifested in different ancient writings, then you would understand how out of Babel came the splitting of the nations. And then as soon as God did that, some people went back to Babel and they started building Babylon. And it became this huge nation. Nimrod was a part of that. That started growing and essentially becoming the biggest nation in the ancient world, the biggest merchant nation, all the different things that are going to be talked about. Babel was huge. Babylon became this mega center of the ancient world. And it was very pagan. It was all filled with pagan idols. It was totally contrary to God in every way. And Babylon, by the way, one of the angel shepherds, principalities that God gave some of the Israelites over to for the time of the dispersion. And he told those principalities, shepherd the people and do not kill or hurt or harm any more than I have allowed you to. And these shepherd principalities did it anyway. Well, the principality of Babylon was one of those that did that. And so God would have probably wanted to invoke vengeance upon that, or punishment even, rather, on that principality of the nation of Babylon for the way that he treated God's chosen nation of people during the dispersion. And so to prove that out, I went looking in the Old Testament for prophecies about Babylon. Was the destruction of Babylon prophesied? Was it relevant to what we just read about this mystery, secret Babylon, hidden Babylon? Did it match up? And what I find is that it actually did. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 13 real quick. So here in Isaiah 13, verse 19. So this is the first reference where I found Babylon. It says, Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. That's a pretty strong statement. And its description here of Babylon being the glory of kingdoms, similar to what we saw in Revelation, where it said this whore sat on the beast. The whore of Babylon rides the beast, and it's on top of many waters. Those waters being multitudes, thousands, millions of people, nations, tongues. The glory of kingdoms, as Babylon is said to have in the Old Testament, in Isaiah 13. Now let's go to the next chapter, Isaiah 14, verse 4. Says, Thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, How hath the oppressor ceased? The golden city ceased. For the Lord has broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. So, again, well, even in verse 6 here, I notice now it says, He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, he that ruled the nations in anger, is persecuted, and none hinders. This is a call out against the principality of Babylon because of his wickedness, the way he dealt with people, and especially God's own chosen people, Israel. And it says, it's the golden city, the golden city. Can you imagine what that might mean? And in reference to these other passages, the golden city, what did chapter 13 say? The glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency. Now let's go back and let's go in chapter 14 to verse 22. It continues about Babylon. For I will rise up against them, says the Lord of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name, the remnant, the son, the nephew, says the Lord. So I had to ask myself when I saw these verses, it's talking about this utter destruction of Babylon. Like Sodom and Gomorrah, no one would ever find it again, probably. It would be destroyed to the ground. It would be just cut off. And it was called this beautiful city, this city of cities, ruler over nations, as it talked about the whore of Babylon, on many waters, multitudes. The city of gold. Let's go now to Isaiah chapter 21. There's another reference. Verse 9. And behold, here comes a chariot of men with a couple horsemen. And he answered and said, Babylon is fallen, and all the graven images of her gods he has broken to the ground. Now, if you'll notice this statement, Babylon is fallen, and all the graven images of her gods, he has broken unto the ground. That is the same thing that's said in Revelation. Revelation chapter 18, both 14 and 18. Revelation 14:8. Another angel said, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And then in chapter 18, verse 2, he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean bird. Now, those who would think that the mystery Babylon of Revelation 17 is somehow the nation of Israel or Judah or Jerusalem, that is not the case with those places, and never was it the case. And so when you look at the real Babylon that we've just gone through, Isaiah was written about Babylon, the ancient nation, not Israel, not Jews, Jerusalem or Judah. It was definitely talking about that city over on the Tigris River in ancient Ur, Babylon. It is this wicked city that became a massive megalopolis for the entire world up until the time of Christ. And I would bet you that what has probably been erased from history is the fact that at the time of Christ's coming in 70 AD, Babylon was utterly destroyed from the face of the earth without a trace. That's something I need to study more. I need to find if there's any evidence or trace of that or any mention of that type of thing. But it sounds like, based on the prophecies in the Old Testament, that Babylon was to be utterly consumed at this time by these 10 dominion principalities plus the beast, where they were given power and that God used them to do his will for this time in this very pivotal moment in history. Now, guys, this is one of those things that's really hard for me to figure out how to deal with. You know, when I want to present this topic in the video, but I'm really struggling with where's the evidence that backs up what I'm seeing in the scriptures. The only thing I can say about the nation of Babylon is that actually the history of Babylon from about, the time when Nebuchadnezzar came in to take the Jews into Babylon, from that time forward, a lot of the history is a little sketchy, especially towards closer to the time of Christ. There's some strains of research out there that say that even that Alexander the Great did not really exist. Now, I haven't fully vetted that out, but Alexander the Great is one of the ones that went into Babylon and conquered it. But all I could do, and I read the scriptures as I'm presenting them here to you, is all I could see was that God was saying, just like all these other nations, he was going to judge Babylon. And in the Old Testament prophets, he's saying that right alongside saying, I'm going to judge Jerusalem, I'm going to judge Egypt, I'm going to judge Edom, and I'm going to judge Babylon. So it's not equivalent to Jerusalem, obviously. And so we have to ask ourselves, if God is true, and he's not a liar, which I don't believe he is in any way, then when he says that Babylon is going to be made like Sodom and Gomorrah, we have to believe that he either did it or, we have to believe he did it, because I don't think in this case there's any possibility that could happen in the future. This prophecy and all this prophecy is related to the time of Christ. So it's just hard for me. I want to present all the evidence. In this case, I only have been able to go so far. So I just want to put that out there for you. Now let's jump also to Isaiah chapter 47. In verses 1 through 9, we'll read, it says more about Babylon. It says, "Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground. There is no throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans. For thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones, grind meal, Uncover thy locks, make bare the leg, uncover the thigh, pass over the rivers. Thy nakedness will be uncovered, yea, thy shame shall be seen. I will take vengeance. I will not meet thee as a man. For our Redeemer, the Lord of hosts, is his name, a Holy One of Israel. Sit thou silent and get thee into darkness, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called the Lady of Kingdoms. The Lady of Kingdoms. Again, this is very, to me, connected to these statements about the whore of Babylon, the Lady of Kingdoms. It's called her in the other passages. Babylon itself is called her. Thy nakedness shall be seen. I will take my vengeance on you. This is not, and by the way, these passages in Isaiah are right next to other passages about Israel and Jerusalem. So we know it's not talking about Babylon in the sense that it means Jerusalem or Israel. It's Babylon. Babylon is also under the judgment of God because of what it did to his people wickedly. And apparently, according to some of these prophecies, did to many of the peoples of earth, getting them involved with their pagan worship and prostitution, fornication. It seems to be the common thread of all of this, but with the nation, the megalopolis of Babylon in the ancient world, not with Israel and not with Jerusalem. It says in verse 5, sit thou silent and get thee into darkness, daughter of the Chaldeans. Thou shalt no more be called for the Lady of Kingdoms. I was wroth with my people. I have polluted mine inheritance and given them into thine hand. Thou didst show them no mercy. Upon the ancient hast thou verily heavily laid thy yoke. That's exactly what I was just saying about this being one of the shepherd principalities that took in some of the dispersed nation of Israel. Babylon was one of the main places that Israelites went after Jerusalem was first conquered. And so he's saying this shepherd angel has polluted his people, polluted the nation of Israel by introducing them to pagan worship, idol worship, the prostitution, all of the blood types of rituals that the Jewish nation got involved in. And they brought all that back with them. But they were definitely judged. Israel and Jerusalem were definitely judged. However, God had another special judgment reserved for the whore of Babylon. Babylon itself had a special judgment reserved for it. And this is in other prophecies too, not just in the Bible, but outside the Bible, including the books of Enoch, the Dead Sea Scrolls, other writings about the judgment of these nations. Babylon was under the judgment of God, and it was not an indirect reference to Jerusalem or Israel. They were given their own judgments, and those were a lot less veiled. There's no secret, no hidden mystery about that judgment, but this one was kept secret probably for the time so that God could wage this war, do what he had to do with both his people, and take vengeance against Babylon at the same time. As thou said, I shall be a lady forever, so that thou did not lay these things to thy heart, neither did you remember the latter end of it. Therefore hear now this, thou art given to pleasures that dwellest carelessly, that say in thine heart, I am, and none else beside me. I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children. But these two things shall come to thee in a moment, in one day, the loss of children and widowhood. They shall come upon thee in the perfection for the multitude of thy sorceries and the great abundance of thine enchantments. He's saying to Babylon itself, not Israel and not Jerusalem. He's saying to Babylon, I'm going to bring it down on your head in a moment. It's all going to happen at once when you won't expect it. And that seems to be exactly what did happen. And you read about that war in Revelation chapter 19, where it literally happened. But this seems to be exactly what is being referred to in Revelation with the whore of Babylon. It's a mystery. It's a secret. But that he would judge that whore at the same time as Israel. In other places in the Bible, as you can see, I've searched for Babylon just in general across the entire scriptures. Even in the books of Psalms where David's writing, it says in Psalm 137:8, "O daughter of Babylon, who art to be destroyed, happy shall he be that rewards thee as thou hast served us." See, there was an enmity between God and Babylon because Babylon had treated, as David says, treated his people with wickedness, poorly, with degeneracy, by killing them, by slaughtering some of them, by giving them over to pagan worship and fornication. So it's all through the Bible, really, but you can see it even here in Psalms where David's writing about Babylon. And again, here in Zechariah chapter 2, verse 7, we see him saying, "Deliver thyself, O Zion, that dwells with the daughter of Babylon." This daughter of Babylon was the whore of Babylon. And Israel was all tangled up with this because they were inside Babylon for so long. But yes, the judgment was against this whore of Babylon, called out many times in these prophecies. In Isaiah, Zechariah, Psalms, we see it again and again. And now we see in Revelation chapter 18, verse 10, again, that as it said in those other passages, that judgment was going to come quick. And it says here in verse 10 that, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city. Again and again it says how mighty the city Babylon was. City of gold, city of cities of all nations. For in 1 hour is thy judgment come. That was going to come quick. And we saw that a few different times in the old passages, the Old Testament. And it talks in verse 2 about that he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, the hold of every foul spirit, a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. And these are all references, again, that seem to always be in prophecy and in the books of Scripture and other ancient books. Every foul spirit, cages of unclean spirits and birds. These are all spiritual references. And just as we saw in the Old Testament, God said he was going to make Babylon, he was going to destroy them in an hour and make them the habitation of devils. Okay, we saw that in Isaiah. So it's reiterated here. And it was in reference to Babylon, not Israel, Babylon, not Jerusalem, every time in the Old Testament. And in the next passage, it would go into stuff about Jerusalem. So you knew it wasn't talking about Jerusalem. Verse 3, for all nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. This is one of those passages that when I had considered whether this was Israel or Jerusalem or Judah, this passage, this verse, chapter 18, verse 3, did not make sense. The Jewish nation at this time was not wealthy. They weren't really wealthy. They had just come back from the dispersion. I mean, they had a place to live inside the Roman Empire, but they weren't known as wealthy people. Of course, there were some rich Jews, but they were not a wealthy kingdom. This type of thing could not have been said about Jerusalem or about the Jewish people. They weren't merchants of the earth, and they weren't waxed rich through the abundance of their delicacies. Now, Babylon, that could have been said about. It was a huge trade center. Merchants everywhere, nations from all over the earth brought things, and they were on those rivers, so they could transport goods up and down those rivers very easily. Babylon was a natural center of trade for the known world before the time of Christ. So it just makes sense to me that this is more talking about the real nation of Babylon, where the Tower of Babel stood in ancient past. Verse 4, I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, that ye receive not of her plagues. Again, as I said before, there's some Jewish people, some Israelites left in Babylon, even at this time, the real Babylon, over in the Fertile Crescent. And he's saying, come out of her. because you don't want to receive her judgment, her plagues, because I'm about to judge her. So that's what makes sense in this context. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her, double according to her works, in the cup which she hath filled to her double. Now that's actually a statement we just read out of Isaiah about giving to her as she rewarded you. Reward her as she rewarded you. And in that statement, God's talking about the way that Babylon treated the nation of Israel while they were there. Reward her as they rewarded you, according to her works. That's exactly what it's talking about. So it matches with every prophecy against Babylon in the Old Testament, and none of the prophecies against Jerusalem. How much has she glorified herself and lived deliciously? So much torment and sorrow give her. For she says in her heart, I sit a queen, and I am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. This is quotes straight out of the book of Isaiah that we just read. Therefore her plagues will come in one day, death and mourning, famine, and she shall be burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God that judges her. And that, I believe, is what truly happened. And again, I want to do more reference research to see if I can find when that city actually was destroyed of Babylon. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her will bewail her and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning. To me, there's no way on earth, again, that this can be Jerusalem. The kings of earth didn't care about Jerusalem. The Romans didn't care about Jerusalem. I've read in their historians' writings where it was more of a nuisance to them. When Titus was in the city destroying it, he didn't care that much for it, but he didn't want to destroy all the buildings. He said, these are nice buildings. We should keep this. There's no reason to destroy their heritage. He didn't care anything about it, but he recognized it as the Jewish heritage. There is no sense in which this verse could refer to Jerusalem. The kings of the earth will not bewail the destruction of Jerusalem, nor did they. They didn't lament for her. And so it doesn't make sense that this would refer to Jerusalem. It makes 100% sense that it would refer to Babylon, the city of the earth, the golden city that was in bed with every king on earth, financially and otherwise. Verse 10, standing afar off for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, the great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more. There was no one weeping over the fact that Jerusalem was going to be destroyed. Nobody wept over that. Nobody wept over the temple being destroyed. The merchants of the earth couldn't care less. But they would care about Babylon. Babylon was the center of trade in the known world probably at the time. Verse 12, the merchandise of gold, silver, precious stones, pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, scarlet, and all thine wood, all manner of vessels of ivory, and manner of vessels of precious wood, and brass, and iron, and marble, cinnamon, odors, ointment, frankincense, wine, oil, flour, wheat, beasts, sheep, horses, chariots, slaves, and souls of men. This is all trading goods. It is massive amounts of trading goods, and that is what could not be referring to Jerusalem. It didn't have that. It was not that large. It didn't have a huge center of trade where all these different things were flowing in and out of the city. Now, Babylon, on the other hand, was a massive trade and commerce city. It was miles and miles and miles and miles wide and long. It was huge, one of the biggest cities in the ancient world. And all of this would have made sense about Babylon, but not about Jerusalem. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which are dainty and goodly departed from thee. Thou shalt find them no more. The merchants of these things which are made rich by her will stand afar off for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, that great city, It was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour so great riches come to naught. Every shipmaster, the company in ships, and sailors, as many as trade by sea, stood afar off, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto that great city? And by the way, they would have been able to see that smoke from the inlet of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers at the is that the Indian Ocean? Let's see here on the map. Or is that the Persian Gulf? Yeah, the Persian Gulf. Sorry. So yeah, you can see here how in this map, right near, just to the northeast of the word Iraq on this map. So northeast of the word Iraq, where I'm moving my mouse there, where the Tigris and Euphrates came close to one another, that's essentially the area where Babel was. Both the Tower of Babel, and then after the dispersion of all the nations and the tower was destroyed, it was the city of Babylon. And that was the location. And you would have seen the smoke. If that city was on fire and destroyed, you would have seen it from the Persian Gulf. The ship traders would come from the Persian Gulf and go up those rivers to deliver goods and then take them back out again. This was a major city of commerce for the world. And these cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like this great city? They cast dust on their heads, cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, that great city wherein we were made rich, all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. Does that sound like what happened to Jerusalem? Nobody was weeping, saying that they were rich because of Jerusalem. And in 1 hour it was made desolate, and now they were crying. People were not wailing and crying over Jerusalem, but they would have done so over Babylon. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And if you do know much about the area we were just looking at on the map, you can see here that the city of Baghdad is now built where Babylon used to be. And so we don't have any traces anymore of Babylon. Well, we do actually. There's museums over there, and they have artifacts from Babylon and all those different things, but it was essentially laid waste. And they rebuilt the city of Baghdad on top of the rubble that was Babylon. In verse 22, the voice of harpers, musicians, pipers, trumpeters will be heard no more at all in thee, and no craftsman of whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in thee, and the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. The light of a candle will not shine any more in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and the bride will be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth. By thy sorceries were all nations deceived. Is that Jerusalem or Israel or Judah? They did not deceive all nations through their sorceries. That didn't happen. So with the city of Babylon, it certainly did happen. It was known for that kind of pagan mysticism and magic. And so it makes sense that it was Babylon, actual Babylon. And that is the mystery. That's the secret, is that it was Babylon, and that, the judgment was known of from Isaiah, but it wasn't known when until this moment, until the delivering of this prophecy to John in the middle of the first century, just a few years before it was going to occur. And in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. Do you realize that Babylon did slay every prophet? Every prophet was sent to Babylon to tell the Israelites of their wickedness, to change their ways, to come out, to be separate, to be holy unto the Lord. But who killed them? Well, sometimes it was the Jews, but it was at the hand of the Babylonians. Babel killed the prophets. The blood of the prophets was found. It says here, in her was found the blood of the prophets and the saints, and all that were slain upon the earth, on the land, rather. And so, yes, the prophets were all slain in Babylon. That's where they were sent, to the Israelites in Babylon, and they were slain. So back in Revelation in chapter 19, we continue. The story of the whore of Babylon continues. And this is one of the most interesting parts too. In verse 2 it says, "True and righteous are his judgments, for he hath judged the great whore, which did corrupt the earth with her fornication, and has avenged the blood of his servants at her hand. Let us be glad and rejoice, and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife hath made herself ready. And to her was granted she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the saints. And he said unto me, Write, blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. He that saith unto me, These are the true sayings of God." Verse 11, "I saw heaven opened, behold, a white horse. He that sat on him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness doth he judge and make war." Of course, this is Jesus Christ. "And he was clothed in a vesture dipped in blood. His name is called the Word of God," the Logos, Tautheou, the Word of God. This is Jesus Christ. "And the armies which were in heaven followed him on the white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. These are the saints who gained white garments because they were faithful to Jesus and God and spoke boldly and were killed for their faith in the first century." That's who these on the horses were, coming in the clouds with him at 70 AD. "And out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, and with it he should smite the nations, and rule them with a rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of the fierceness of the wrath of God. And he hath on his vesture and his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven." Now this is spiritual fowls. This is in the spiritual realm. These are not physical birds. This word in Greek, fowls, it's actually orneon, and it was used often for spiritual creatures that fly in the heavens, birds. "Come, gather yourselves together for the supper of the great God, that ye may eat the flesh of kings, the flesh of captains, the flesh of mighty men, the flesh of horses, and of them that sit on them, and flesh of all men, both free and bond, both small and great. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth." Sounds like, to me, when it says this, it's the beast and the 10 horns, the 10 rulers that merged and had unity with the beast and worked with him for a small time. They gathered their armies together to make war against him that sat on the horse. Chapter 17 said that's exactly what they were going to do. "And against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire, burning with brimstone. As it said, the beast would go into perdition," destruction. That's exactly what happened here in chapter 19, verse 20. "And the remainder, the remnant, were slain with the sword of him that sat on the horse, which sword proceeded out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh." So in the end, Christ, with his saints, wages war against the beast and these 10 powers that are with him, and the second beast, and defeats them all, and throws the first and second beast in the lake of fire. I believe at this time, as Zechariah chapter 11 says, that the right eye of one of these major principalities was darkened, and that principality has gone on and actually exists in our modern time and is again waging war against God. And that's hence the one-eyed symbol that we always see the celebrities making in Hollywood, covering one eye in allegiance to this principality, this demonic principality that was alive and that God already judged in that time and defeated and darkened his right eye in Zechariah chapter 11. So after the defeat of the great whore of Babylon and these powers, these principalities, including the beast and the second beast and the Babylon whore, the next thing that happens in Revelation 20 is that an angel with a key to the bottomless pit comes down and binds Satan. Because Satan, remember, he gave the power to the beast to do all these things. And so God binds Satan now so that he can't do this kind of work for a period of 1,000 years in Revelation chapter 20. And I've done much more research and other videos on that passage, so I won't go into that now. But that concludes our kind of study of the whore of Babylon and what is being talked about in Revelation, and why it would mention this whore in relationship to this prophecy of judgment against Jerusalem and the Jews. This judgment also is against the city of Babylon, the ancient city of Babylon, and the principality over that nation that essentially, as it said, poisoned God's people with fornication and pagan practices and idol worship and human sacrifice and blood ritual. All these different things that came into God's chosen people because of this principality of Babylon, that in the end of his judgment against his own nation for their wickedness, he also judged Babylon for the wickedness that he brought upon them. And it all happened in this culmination, this pivotal moment in history, 70 AD, when God made all of these changes and these judgments come to pass. And praise him for it, for he changed the whole world. He made Christ the authority. And in the end of this world, Christ will gain, he not only has the authority, but he will put down all of these other rulers in the end. And so it'll be a wonderful thing to see. I hope I'm there to see it. But God bless you, and thank you for the time you spent in researching this with me. Take care. So there you have it, guys. And I mean, you know, I know that probably most of the people that come to this video believing that Babylon in Revelation is Jerusalem and that Babylon is the Jews are not going to change their opinion based on this video. I pretty much guessed that that was going to be the case. But I'm just, everything that I showed you in this video in the scriptures to me points to the fact that it was truly Babylon and Jerusalem that were being judged. And I'm very confident about that. But as I said before, you know, that would, because of the testimony of the Old Testament prophets, that would require that Babylon was truly thrown down by God at this time period. And if that has to do with the principality of Babylon specifically, it could be that, but I really feel like it needs to be Babylon proper. It needs to be the city coming under judgment in a similar fashion to the way that Jerusalem did, or prior. The Old Testament prophecies about Babylon being thrown down like Sodom and Gomorrah is pretty specific. And it could have happened any time between the time those prophecies were given and the time of Christ. But again, the way that the passages read out and the way that Revelation talks about Babylon, number one, precludes it from being Jerusalem. And number two, seems to say that in that time it would be judged just as Jerusalem was being judged. And it was all for the same, you know, all the things that led up to the time of Christ, where Babylon took the portion of God's people and dealt with them horribly, and essentially turned his people away from him in many ways. We can only assume that God would judge that the way he said he was going to do it in the prophets and in Revelation. And so that's really where I come down on this. And it spawned a bunch of threads of research for me to find out more about Babylon and its history before the time of Christ, which again, I said I have started to study, and it seems very, the evidence seems very slim for what really happened and what had happened. So I'm just saying it's something that I'm going to keep studying. I'm going to keep studying, and I wanted you to know that I particularly had not felt 100% confident in that part of this study. What was the true history of Babylon? It may be something that is almost impossible to gather from the history that we do have, from the writings we do have, but I'm going to research it and try. So in the future, I may come back to this topic, and I just wanted to be forthcoming with you guys that, sometimes I don't have all the answers, and I'm still searching too. So God bless you and your research as you do the same thing. Take care.